Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Another watch band review day today. A couple of weeks ago I reviewed the bark&jack premium seatbelt or seatbelt Nato strap. Loved it, compared it to the Sydney Strapco premium seatbelt Nato. Found that the bark&jack was more compliant, more comfortable, more flexible, and the hardware was just that little bit better. So across the board, while the Sydney Strapco strap was good and I'd kind of recommend it, the bark&jack was better. And I actually made the comment that the bark&jack was probably the best Nato I'd ever used. The response to that video was across the board pretty positive, and it was positive in two ways. One, a lot of you liked the video, which is great, but more importantly, a lot of you came back with suggestions for other companies that provide NATOs that I could look at, and even better, you provided other options, other kinds of bands, other alternatives to NATOs, or at least to nylon NATOs, that I should follow up in the future. Now, I haven't done that yet. I've stuck with NATOs. I've stuck with traditional buckle and tang clasping systems. I will chase down some of those other alternatives that you gave me at a later date, but I just haven't done so right now. One of the things that a lot of you suggested was that there wasn't a lot of point spending money on things like a bark&jack Nato when you could go to Alibaba and get essentially exactly the same product at a vastly reduced price. A lot of others also suggested other premium sellers in around about the same price range as the bark&jack that I might want to look at. So moving forward, what I tried to do was accommodate both of those thoughts, because I was interested myself in just how much cheaper could you buy these bands and what would you get for your money. So what I did was I picked two high-end brands that were suggested to me by the watchers. So I went to Strapify, an Australian-based premium NATO provider, and the Cincy company, based funnily enough in Cincinnati, which also provides high-quality seatbelt material NATO bands. I also went to the complete other end of the market and checked out places which were also recommended for me. Funnily enough, one of them labelled I think it's called the cheapest NATO straps store, and the other one I went straight to the source and went shopping at Alibaba. Shopping at Alibaba is a bit of a pain unless you're buying 5,000 of things, so I then went to Aliexpress, which is essentially the same thing. Funnily enough, you can basically buy watches for much the same price via either Alibaba or Aliexpress. It's just a bit more difficult finding what you needed if you go Alibaba. Now, the first thing to note out of all this is I bought this with my own money. I was a shopper just like you, taking advantage or not taking advantage of whatever deals were on offer. I didn't reach out to anyone as a YouTuber or get any kind of deal on any of this. The second thing to point out is that what I found was that if you do chase an equivalent level of quality, at least in the material, so go for this premium seatbelt leather in the 1.2 millimeter thickness, the price spread simply is not that great. The most expensive band I bought was from Cincy, and that was around about $25 US. The cheapest band I bought was from Alibaba, and that was $8.50. So that could, depending on how you measure it, that could be a lot of money or not a lot of money. You could argue that the Cincy was 3 times the price, therefore vastly more expensive. You could also say that the Cincy was only $14 more expensive, and in a world where this is a band that I'm putting on, in this case for these tests, they were on watches between $600 and maybe $1,200 US. That $14 difference is frankly neither here nor there. What I did find when I pressed ahead was, in the first instance, the base material and the quality of the cutting and forming of that material is largely indistinguishable. So if we look at the Alibaba first, what we can see is everything's neat, everything's tidy, everything's pretty much what it should be. Then we'll go move at the cheapest Nato straps, and again, very similar. So it continued in the same sort of quality. And again, if I look at both the Cincy and the Strapify bands, pretty much common threads all across, good solid material, well cut, good lasering on the ends, nothing messy. So from this point of view, at the moment, you can't see what your money is getting when you spend more. When you go to the hardware though, the differences do start to open up. In particular, if you look at, the first thing I'd say is when I have the Alibaba, for example, I actually have to write on it somewhere that it is an Alibaba, because there's no marking of what the company is that sold this to me. I think it was actually Zhuzhong was the actual provider. But because these watches are because these bands are clearly made as commodities intended to have someone else customize them and put their stamp on it, then they come as complete clean skins. There's nothing to identify what this band is. It is by definition a commodity good. So in order for me to remember which one this is, I wrote the little Ali on the back of the bands. If you look at the hardware, it's pretty nondescript, nothing particularly special. The tang's okay, I guess, but not particularly robust. If we move to the cheapest Nato, it gets even worse. Now, I haven't had to write on this one because these were, because they were so heavily patterned, I could remember which ones they were. So therefore I haven't had to write on them. But if you do check and look carefully, there's no branding anywhere on this. Again, it's a straight commodity strap. Here the tangs are even lighter and cheaper. I think I've bent one of those tangs already on one of my watches, and all in all, the hardware on the cheapest Nato strap, I was really quite unhappy with. I would not really trust this with particularly heavier watches. I've got it on some smaller, lighter vintage watches at the moment. On anything heavier, I'd be quite concerned almost about the security of the band. Go to Cincy and it's a bit better. The hardware is quite good, quite solid, nothing to worry about. Again, utterly unbranded, which really caught me by surprise, given that the Cincy is one of the more expensive bands that I bought. Everything seems okay. I'm just surprised, and I would think that Cincy really should upgrade their hardware, and in particular go for some branding or something to differentiate what they're providing from the base commodity stock that you can pick up from somewhere like cheapest Natos or Alibaba. Now, when you get to Strapify, clearly there's a massive upgrade here. Quite a different set of hardware that's been provided, clearly branded. They've obviously gone to some level of customization with the Strapify band and hardware. And that customization that Strapify in particular did continues when you actually just look at, for example, the holes. Whereas the Cincy seems to maintain basically the same generic hole pattern of the other commodity brands, the Strapify one has larger holes, more slightly further apart. I think this actually accommodates the upgraded hardware, the upgraded tang on the Strapify strap far better, makes it far easier to fit, and it also seems to reduce the stresses on the material around the band tang interface. If I look really closely at both some of the cheapest Natos and Alibaba straps, you can already see some deformation of the material around where the tang connects. You don't get any of that at all with the Strapify. It's lovely and smooth, and even though it's carrying much heavier watches, seems to be no deformation there at all. Finally, I really should note that you do get a very different buying experience from the commodity sellers versus, I'll call it, the premium sellers. From the more expensive brands, when you lodge your order, you get a confirming email. The email gave me some tracking information for the delivery. Both deliveries came in under 10 days. Both came with nice little cards promising me some sort of coupon code and price reduction for any future buys. The experience on both Cheapest Nato and the Alibaba site was completely the opposite. You make your buy, and yes, it doesn't vanish completely. If you go back into the site, you will have a confirmation that you made your order, but you don't get any kind of email back. You didn't get any kind of tracking information on the delivery, and at the same time, all I got from both of them was a nondescript letter that I think Cheapest Nato turned up 25 days later, and the Alibaba delivery came 32 days after I placed my order. So, taking all of that, conclusion number one: if saving every penny is really important to you, and that your NATOs are nothing in your mind, your NATO bands are nothing more to the commodity, and as long as the band is comfortable and flexible and it's nice to wear, you don't care that much about all the other stuff like little niceties on the hardware or any kind of the buying experience, then the good news is you can save yourself around about $14 by buying the very cheapest bands off somewhere like Aliexpress, and you're only going to have to wait an extra 2 weeks or so for the 2, maybe 3 weeks extra for the delivery to come through. My second conclusion is, though, if you want the best buying experience, if you want that feeling that you're buying from a smaller company, if you want a little bit better service, if you want to get the band faster, being able to track the delivery, and probably most importantly, you want it to come with some improved hardware, some improved branding, and something to kind of raise it up from just that base commodity kind of product, then that's only going to cost you an extra $12 to $14 per band. So it's a very small price to pay for what could be for you quite a significant benefit. My third conclusion out of this is, of the bands I looked at, which was the Alibaba, Cheapest Nato, Cincy Strap Co and Strapify, the Strapify was the best band. It was not the dearest. It's about $2 cheaper than the Cincy Strap Co. Comes with better hardware and better holes for the tang. So all in all, I think it's just a better band at a slightly cheaper price. Okay, now the fourth, almost non-conclusion is, how would I compare the Strapify band to the bark&jack band? And that's really, I say it's a non-conclusion because it's much tougher and probably in the end really comes down to personal preference, and it might even change watch by watch. So the differences are basically the hardware and the holes. The bark&jack has more squared off hardware and obviously has those square holes. The Strapify has slightly curved, slightly more curvaceous hardware and has the round holes. That's it. That's the difference I could find. I think the engraving on the bark&jack is probably, no, that's not true. That's not fair. The engraving on the bark&jack is certainly better as well than the engraving that you get in the Strapify. And I think the bark&jack is like $1 or $2 cheaper. So across the board, I'm more likely to flip-flop between these two depending on what offer happens to be available at the time I'm buying a band, and probably more importantly, what colors are available for the watch I want when I'm buying the band. So across the board, I'd probably say the bark&jack by a nose over the Strapify, but if you can get a better deal on the Strapify, or if it comes in a color or a size that you prefer, then it is so close that I'd just go with what's available. So that's really it. It's a story, like so many things, you get what you pay for. personally, I think the subtle but very real advantages of the premium end, particularly like the bark&jack and Strapify, over the commodity end of Alibaba and cheapest Nato, are more than worth for those two, 12 to 14 extra US dollars per band. In a world where I'm spending as a minimum 500 US and as a maximum 2 to 3,000 US dollars on a watch, the splitting hairs and taking risks over $12 on a band makes no sense to me, and I wouldn't do it. But if saving every dollar is important to you, it is true. There are comfortable bands that are okay, that you can buy from Alibaba and cheapest Nato for around about 8 to 10 US dollars. Yeah, so that's it. I'd be interested in your comments below. It will certainly inform what I do next. And anyway, it's been great fun. I've really quite enjoyed geeking out on bands. If you wait a little while, a card is going to come up and it's got my Instagram handle and an email address. You can please follow me over on Instagram. You'll get to see more of my watches and my watch collection. People keep asking me to do wristwatch checks. I routinely forget, so if you go check me out on Instagram, you will see what I wear on a day-to-day basis. But since I've remembered today, I'll say I am wearing my brand new Boulder Expedition Eiger, I think it is, the one with the white dial and the all-loomed dial, which is kind of funky in the dark. But anyway, yeah, so that's what I'm wearing. As I said, coming up afterwards. Please like and subscribe this video. If you enjoyed this video, if there's people out there who are wondering what to do with their bands, point them towards my video. They can get some idea about what the differences are in the different kinds of bands and what you get when you pay for them. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.